The Grand Hall of Valerion did not just glow, it blinded. Gold veins pulsed in the marble walls. Gravity anchors kept the ceiling floating miles above. This was the heart of the most arrogant empire in the stars. And at the center of it all stood Princess Xylia. She looked down from her crystalline throne. Her skin was a shimmering violet. Her eyes were like cold emeralds. She was a goddess of the high-gravity spires. And she was bored. At the base of her throne stood a gift. A human. He looked small. He looked fragile. He wore a simple black suit and a heavy metal collar around his neck. To the Valerian, that collar was a leash, a dampener, a sign that the creature wearing it was a Tier 5 lifeform. Weak, menial. Xylia let out a sharp, melodic laugh. "This?" she sneered. Her voice echoed through the silent hall. "This is my new protector? A hairless, soft-skinned primate? My father's sense of humor is becoming cruel." The human did not move. He didn't even blink. His name was Elias. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. "Kneel, pet," Xylia commanded. Elias remained standing. His gaze was fixed on a point just above her head. "It can't even understand me," she mocked. She turned to her elite guards. They were 7 feet tall, encased in powered silver armor. "See how it trembles? It knows it doesn't belong here." Elias wasn't trembling. He was breathing, slowly, deeply. Suddenly, the air in the room went cold. The gravity anchors groaned. A shadow flickered in the rafters. Then another. Shadow stalkers. When the guards hissed. Assassins. The sworn enemies of the throne. They moved faster than the eye could follow. They were ghosts made of knives. The elite guards raised their plasma rifles. They were too slow. The first assassin dropped from the ceiling like a falling star. Its poisoned blade was inches from the princess's throat. Xylia froze. Her breath hitched. She saw the edge of the blade. She saw her death. Then there was a sound, a sharp, violent crack. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the sound of the air breaking. In a blur of motion, the human was no longer at the foot of the throne. He was beside her. Elias had caught the assassin's wrist. His bare hand gripped the chitinous armor of the monster. The sound of bones snapping filled the quiet hall. The assassin screeched. Elias didn't flinch. With a casual flick of his arm, he threw the 100-pound killer across the room. It hit the marble wall with the force of a cannonball. Elias stepped back into his original position. He adjusted his cufflink. His breath was still slow, still deep. The princess stared at him. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I told you to look away, princess," Elias said. His voice was a low, terrifying rumble. The smell of ozone usually makes royalty feel faint. Xylia looked at the collar around his neck. The dampener. It wasn't there to protect her from him. She realized, with a sudden shiver of dread, that it was there to protect the world from him. The humans hadn't sent an escort. They had sent a monster in a suit. The silence in the throne room didn't last long. The sky outside the great glass domes turned from blue to a bruised purple. Then it turned black. Not the black of night, the black of the void. Deep space sirens began to wail. It was a sound the Valerian had not heard in 1,000 years. It was a sound of extinction. "The Void Eaters," Xylia whispered. Her face was pale. They shouldn't be here. Our orbital shields are invincible." Elias didn't look at the sky. He looked at the princess. His expression was unreadable. "Nothing is invincible, princess," he said. "Especially not things built on pride." Suddenly, the palace rocked. A massive kinetic impact sent the gravity anchors screaming. The floating ceiling tilted. Dust and ancient gold filigree rained down. On the monitors, the Imperial fleet was being erased. The Void Eater harvesters were gargantuan. They were biological nightmares the size of moons. They didn't fire lasers. They fired concentrated gravity. The Valerian ships, the pride of the sector, simply folded in on themselves. They were crushed into tiny metallic spheres like discarded trash. "We have to get to the pods," the guard captain roared. Xylia stumbled. Her elegant robe snagged on the debris. She looked to her elite guards for help, but the invincible warriors were in a panic. They were running. They were pushing each other aside to reach the escape routes. Their courage had been a costume. A second blast hit. The dome shattered. Shards of glass, each the size of a spear, fell toward the throne. Xylia closed her eyes and waited for the end. She felt a hand on her waist. It felt like a band of heated iron. Elias pulled her close. He didn't run. He moved with a terrifying, calculated grace. He shielded her body with his own as the glass rained down. She heard the glass shattering against his back. Clang, clang, clang. It sounded like metal hitting metal. He didn't even groan. "The hangar is 3 levels down," Elias said calmly. "The gravity wells are failing. You won't be able to walk soon. Hold on." "What are you doing?" she gasped. Before she could scream, he leaped in the low gravity of Valerion. Elias didn't just jump. He soared. He cleared 60 feet in a single bound, carrying her like she weighed nothing. They reached the hangar just as the last escape pod was prepping for launch. It was a small, high-speed courier ship. The princess scrambled inside, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked back, expecting to see a legion of her people. The hangar was a graveyard. The useless human stood at the hatch. He looked out at the burning city. The sky was filled with the tentacles of the harvesters. The sun of the Valerian system was being drained. "Get us out of here." Xylia screamed at the pilot. "We can't," the pilot cried. "The harvester's tractor beam has us. We're being pulled into the core." Xylia slumped against the cold floor of the pod. The weak pet sat down across from her. He looked at his hands. They were covered in the dust of her falling empire. "Is this it?" she sobbed. "Is this how the great Valerian ends? In a cage, waiting to be eaten?" Elias looked at her. For the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile of a predator watching a rival fall. "The Valerian ends today," he said. "But the human story, we're just getting to the good part." He reached for the heavy metal collar around his neck. "Princess," he said, "I'm going to need you to look away. This gets loud." The escape pod shuddered. The metal groaned under the pressure of the Void Dieter's tractor beam. Outside, the harvester loomed like a dark god. It was a mass of shifting black oil and jagged stone. It was pulling them into its maw. Princess Xylia curled into a ball. "We are going to die," she whispered. "No one survives the harvester." Elias didn't answer. His fingers were on the seam of the heavy metal collar. Click. The sound was small, but it felt like a thunderclap in the tiny cabin. The collar fell to the floor. It hit the deck with a heavy, leaden thud. It didn't just drop. It seemed to dent the metal plating. Xylia gasped. The air in the pod changed instantly. It felt heavy, thick. Static electricity began to dance across the monitors. The smell of ozone filled the room. Elias stood up. He didn't just stand, he unfolded. His muscles rippled beneath his suit. His veins glowed with a faint, rhythmic light. His eyes, once a dull brown, were now burning like twin embers. What are you?" Xylia stammered. She felt like she couldn't breathe. The sheer presence of him was crushing. "I am a Deathworlder, princess," Elias said. His voice was no longer a rumble. It was a vibration that shook her bones. "Your people live on a world with 0.4 Earth gravity," he continued. "You are built like glass. My world, it tries to kill us every day. Our air is poison. Our predators are nightmares. Our gravity is a relentless weight." He walked toward the airlock. Each footstep cracked the floor tiles. "We don't use dampeners because we are weak," Elias growled. "We use them because if we don't, we break everything we touch. We are too dense for your soft reality." He placed a hand on the emergency manual override. "The pilot said we are trapped in a tractor beam," Elias said. He looked over his shoulder. "A tractor beam is just a rope made of light, and any rope can be snapped if you pull hard enough." "You're going outside?" Xylia screamed. "There is no oxygen. The pressure will pop you like a bubble." Elias leaned into the door. "I've held my breath in deeper oceans than this vacuum. And as for the pressure..." He slammed his fist against the airlock release. "I am the pressure." The door blew outward. The vacuum of space tried to suck everything out. Xylia screamed. clutching her seat as the alarm shrieked. Elias didn't fly out. He gripped the edge of the hull with fingers that bent the reinforced steel like wet clay. He stepped out onto the exterior of the ship. No suit, no helmet, just a man in a ruined tuxedo standing on a spaceship in the middle of a void. He reached into a hidden compartment on the pod's hull. He pulled out a long, sleek case. Inside was a human kinetic rail rifle. It was made of solid tungsten. It weighed more than the princess herself. He braced his feet against the hull. The metal beneath his boots buckled. He aimed the rifle at the heart of the moon-sized harvester. "You call me a pet," he whispered into the silence of the vacuum. He pulled the trigger. The recoil didn't push him back. He was too heavy, too dense. Instead, the entire escape pod was kicked backward by the sheer force of the shot. A slug of solid matter, traveling at a fraction of the speed of light, tore through the darkness. It didn't just hit the harvester. It punched a hole straight through it. The harvester screamed. It wasn't a sound heard through the ears. It was a psychic shockwave that rattled Xylia's teeth. The hole Elias had punched into the monster was glowing, a sickly, radioactive green. The tractor beam flickered. The rope of light snapped. The escape pod tumbled wildly. Inside, Xylia was tossed against the walls like a rag doll. But outside, Elias was a statue of iron. He didn't just stand on the hull. He owned it. He looked at the harvester, and for the first time, the ancient, world-eating horror felt fear. The harvester began to rotate. Its massive, jagged surface bristled with thousands of smaller defense turrets. They all turned. They all aimed at the single, tiny human. A wall of plasma fire erupted. The space between the ship and the monster became a sea of white-hot death. Xylia watched the monitors, tears streaming down her face. "He's gone," she choked out. "Nothing can survive that." But Elias wasn't standing still anymore. He was moving in the low gravity. His speed was impossible. He leaped from the hull of the pod. He didn't float. He launched like a missile. He landed on the surface of the harvester. The impact cratered the monster's obsidian skin. Elias didn't use his rifle anymore. He used his hands. He plunged his fingers into the harvester's armor. He began to tear. He ripped through layers of reinforced shielding. He tore out humming power cables the size of tree trunks. He was a virus, a human-shaped disaster. The harvester's internal systems began to cascade. It tried to vent its atmosphere to blow him off. Elias just hunkered down, his boots grinding deeper into the hull. He reached the core, the dark matter heart. It was a swirling vortex of pure energy, contained within a cage of magnetic glass. It was what powered the fleet. It was what gave the Void Eaters the power to level civilizations. Elias stood before the heart. His suit was shredded. His skin was burnt. He looked like a demon born from the forge of a star. He didn't set a bomb. He didn't hack the system. He pulled back his fist. "For the weak pets of the galaxy," he snarled. He punched the core. The magnetic glass didn't just shatter. It evaporated. The dark matter heart collapsed. For a heartbeat, there was a terrifying, absolute silence. A vacuum of sound. Then the universe turned white. The harvester didn't just explode. It folded in on itself and then expanded in a supernova of blue fire. The shockwave didn't stop at the harvester. It hit the surrounding Void Eater fleet. It hit the moons. It hit the very fabric of the solar system. The invincible fleet was gone. In a single second, 1,000 years of terror had been erased by one man's right hook. The princess watched from the viewport of the drifting pod. The solar system was quiet. The harvesters were dust. And floating in the center of the wreckage, surrounded by the debris of an empire's nightmare, was a tiny, dark speck. A human, still breathing. The rescue fleet arrived 6 hours later. They weren't the proud, golden ships of the Valerion Empire. Those were gone. These were the survivors. Ragtag. Scared. When they found the escape pod, they expected to find a traumatized princess. They did, but she wasn't crying for herself. She was sitting on the floor, staring at the airlock. The door hissed open. The recovery team, elite commandos who thought they were the toughest beings in the quadrant, rushed in. They saw Elias. He was sitting in the corner. His tuxedo was gone. He was covered in black soot and dried blood. He was calmly wrapping a piece of torn fabric around a deep gash on his forearm. The commandos froze. They felt it immediately. The air around him was still heavy. The dampener collar was still lying on the floor, a crushed piece of scrap metal. "Step away from the princess," the lead commando barked, raising his weapon. "Human! On the ground! Now!" Elias didn't even look up. He just kept tying the knot on his bandage. "Lower your weapons," Xylia said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight the commandos had never heard before. "Princess. He is uncollared," the commando protested. "He is a Tier 5 hazard. We have protocols for her." "Your protocols are for pets," Xylia snapped. She stood up. She walked over to Elias and stood beside him. She looked at her people, the people who had run while the world burned. "You think you are the masters of this galaxy?" she asked. "You think you are strong because you built tall towers and shiny ships?" She pointed out the viewport at the glittering dust that used to be a moon-sized harvester. "That man didn't just save my life," she said. "He shattered the lie we've been living. We aren't the predators. We aren't the protectors. We are just children playing in a yard that belongs to them." Elias finally stood up. He was a head shorter than the commandos, but they all took a step back. He looked at the lead commando. Then he looked at the weapon pointed at his chest. "It's okay," Elias said softly. "I'm finished for today." He walked past the guards. They parted for him like the sea. A week later, the Galactic Council convened in an emergency session. The news of the shattered system had spread. Every species was terrified. They wanted to know how a single human could do the impossible. They wanted to know why Earth had kept this a secret. The human ambassador stood before the council. He didn't wear armor. He wore a suit, just like Elias, and he wore a collar. "We didn't hide our strength to trick you," the ambassador explained to the trembling delegates. "We were the dampeners because we wanted to be your friends. We wanted to talk, to trade, to learn." He leaned forward, the light catching the metal of his leash. "Because we knew that the moment we took these off, the conversation would be over." In her new palace, Princess Xylia sat by a window. She wasn't looking at the stars. She was looking at the garden below. Elias was there. He had a new collar on. He was pruning a rose bush. He looked peaceful. He looked useless. Xylia smiled, but her hands shook. She knew the truth now. The galaxy wasn't a kingdom. It was a cage. And the only reason they were all still alive was because the monsters inside the cage had decided to be kind. For now,